Hello Internet, this is Brian Holland. Today I'm going to start a new series called Worldbuilding Wednesday. I don't know that it's going to come out every Wednesday, but when it comes out, it will be a Wednesday. I'm usually going to take a couple things that inspire me a lot and use them to build an essential element that you can use in your world building process. If you want to see how I take The Legend of Zelda and Magic the Gathering to create a new essential element, please stick around. Alright, so I'm going to start up The Legend of Zelda on the original Nintendo. I'm going to make a new character and name them Session 0. And I'm going to go look for some skeletons. In the game they're called Stalfos. I know that there are some in the first dungeon, so I'm going to head up there straight away. I'm going to go grab this sword, but then I'm going to skip ahead to level 1. Now, I've already done some stuff here. Right now, I just want to see how these Stalfos behave. That took 2 hits to kill. 2 hits. Here in a bit, we'll use some math to decide what that means in Dungeon World as far as their hit points are concerned. Now, I want to see how much damage they deal to me. That was 1 hit that did half a heart. There's another half a heart, so that's about 1/6 of my maximum HP. Again, we'll use some math to decide what that means in Dungeon World terms as far as the damage they deal. Notice they have 2 swords. I'm going to use that when we create the creature as well. Alright, next we want to go to gatherer.wizards.com. This is a website where we can search for Magic the Gathering cards. I'll put a description of this in the link below. First thing I want to do is go down to this subtype field. I'm going to type in skeleton, and as soon as this pops up in the drop down, click the skeleton and add it to our search. Next, I don't care so much about mechanics, but I do want some fun flavor text. Flavor text is what we're going to use for world building and creating an established element for a new world. So let's add that. Adding an E in for flavor text almost assures that you're going to get a card, or all of the cards rather, with flavor text. Let's do output to visual spoiler. That's just going to make it easier to sort through the cards. It outputs it in a way that lines them all up nicely and has multiple on a page. And you can see here, this is 3 columns and several rows. Finally, let's take a look at this here. This tells us that we have 37 cards that are both the skeleton subtype and have E in the flavor text, which means cards that have flavor text that are skeletons. So I'm going to look through all of these. I'm not going to bore you with me reading them and thinking about how I can use them, but I'm going to save them to another file so that we can look at them together and decide, what we want to use to make an essential element and how we can make a creature out of it. So out of all 37 of those cards, I narrowed it down to 4 that I really like, and I'm going to read those to you and read their flavor text. I chose Drudge Sentinel, which has: the Cabal assured the 7 houses that hostages receive all the food and rest they require. There's a lot of world building there in just that one sentence. You have a Cabal, the 7 houses. We don't know what those mean, they're out of context, but we know that the Cabal took those hostages and turned them into skeletons. So that's really interesting. I chose Limb Duel's High Guard. The flavor text there reads: death does not prevent us from service to our absent master. As long as Tressorhorn stands, so shall we. I like that because whatever these skeletons are now, they are bound to whatever this evil lord is. And I really like the art on this card. It's basically a skeleton with 2 swords, and since the Stalfos had 2 swords, it fits really nicely. I then chose Barrier of Bones. The flavor text there reads: the Dimir rarely make statements, but when they do, the message is clear. You'll see when I read the text for the skeleton creature I created, how that comes into play. Then finally, I chose Tenacious Dead. Raising the bones of Hekjek the Mad proved far easier than getting them to lie back down. And again, when you read the text I have for my skeletons, you'll see how I incorporated that. I want to talk a little bit about the math. I said that the Stalfos took 2 hits before they died. So taking the average damage output of every one of the 8 standard classes in Dungeon World, I found that 2 hits would be roughly 8 HP. So my skeleton will have 8 HP. They don't really have armor, at least not in the art in Legend of Zelda, so I'm going to leave that off. They deal about 1/6 of my hit points in the Legend of Zelda. So taking the average starting hit points for a level 1 character in Dungeon World, I found it to be about 19.45, a sixth of which is about 3.24. I'm going to round that up to 3.5. We can say that is either a D6, because the average damage on a D6 is 3.5 over time, or something I like because they've got 2 longswords, is a D4 plus 1. You get the same damage average, but the range is a little bit different. So I'm going to say they have dual longswords and deal D4 plus 1 damage. They do have a special quality of undead. Their instinct is to guard, and that's basically commanded by their king, as you'll see right now. Here is the flavor text for Noble Guardians, the skeleton creature I created by using these cards. The nobles made a terrible error when they resurrected a long-dead king to fight in their war. As tenacious in undeath as he was in life, the king won the war, but then sought to teach the noble houses a lesson about bringing the dead to life. The undead king invited the matriarchs and patriarchs of each noble house to a celebration, promising each the task of guarding his most valuable possessions. He murdered each of them as they arrived, and dissolved their flesh so they may look as he did. He then commanded their skeletal remains to guard the crypts and dungeons that serve as his treasury. Their souls will remain tied to his, and can only be put to rest when the Mad King is destroyed. I also added 2 moves, Reassemble and Rise, which is something that, skeletons do in all kinds of literature, and Refrain from Killing Kin. I think this is a really cool way for a player character to be related to one of these dead nobles and learn that this is the noble because it refuses to kill them. That could play into your story quite a bit and help your players understand that, this person used to be someone in your royal family. So that is my take on Noble Guardians. You can take the flavor text from this creature, distill it down just a little bit for your essential element. These events are what made the world the way they are right now. So think about that when you are talking with your players, and just use that to help start the world building process. So how do you do that? Let's take a look at world building questions. Take what I've created here, this skeleton and the text that goes along with it, the essential element that is kind of created with it, and ask some questions based upon that. Let your players answer these. You have come up with the essential element. Let your players build upon it. So, with whom were the nobles at war? This is some backstory that you don't even have to think about. Let them come up with this, work with them to make it fit within the world that you guys are building together. Now, who was the dead king and how long ago did he die? These next 2 I think are really fun. Was it the high nobles or the minor nobles that resurrected the king? And was it that same group of nobles who the king taught his lesson to? What is the king called now? Let the players give him a really evil, cool name. The next part is the party dynamic. That's what I call it anyway. That's not a Dungeon World term. This is meant to replace the bonds in Dungeon World. After 3 or 4 years of playing Dungeon World, I found that we don't really use the bonds the way they're intended. They're kind of meant to give a reason why the party is together, and there are other ways to do that. So I've come up with 2 party dynamics. You can choose one of these or use your imagination and make up another one. The first one is, you are the children of the nobles who resurrected the king, whom you seek to destroy so that you may put your parents' souls to rest. I like that a lot. You know, your parents are these skeletons, and you're trying to kill the big bad evil guy so that you can put their souls to rest. The next one is a little darker. You are the king's hunters, seeking the cowardly remnants of the noble families who hide among the peasants in order to avoid the fate of their peers. So just use your imagination, come up with some fun things to do with that party dynamic. You know, maybe something the players give you during those world building questions can help you build a different party dynamic. And you can always, again, work collaboratively with your players to come up with a better party dynamic. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit like for me. If you like my content, please subscribe and tell your like-minded friends about it. Thanks for watching and have a great day.